We're going to be recording. And there we go. Okay, perfect. So that way then if you want to go back and listen to this, you feel free to do that. All right, so yep, so we'll welcome everybody here who's today. So thanks for joining us here on our first virtual Salt Lake City user group. So for this lunch hour type of a deal. So we'll see how it goes. Just a couple of things. We've got some typical housekeeping stuff. We'll talk about upkeeping meeting stuff. We have a couple of presentations today, really quickly, and then hopefully get some feedback from the rest of you across the board. So feel free to jump in, just like anything else, right? Our dialogue and stuff is just like we do in person. So it's as good then as it is anywhere else. So we're just kind of more virtual than anything else from that perspective. So with that, just a couple of things. We kind of talked about these before in the past a little bit, but just let everybody know. Obviously, it's a safe place. We're here to learn, problem solve, collaborative. I don't think we have much of a problem doing this one. We're all quite vocal, and we want to make it fun and enjoyable, and but at the same time, kind of keep it professional and just obviously place a network from that perspective. So just glad to see everybody's happy, smiling faces, though. That's a good thing. All right, so this world that we're in, folks, right? How many of these things look familiar for everybody? Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, the Stay Home, Stay Safe initiatives, social distancing. Zoom has now become the de facto, right? I mean, Zoom was known, but it's known across multiple areas. I mean, my wife works for the Department of Health here in Utah, and they started using Zoom and stuff. And so I was kind of giving her some insights and tips and tricks about stuff. I mean, everybody in that department had never used Zoom before or hadn't heard about it. So it's now a new terminology. So it's almost like Kleenex now for tissue, right? So it's become almost analogous with that one. And of course, Warren, great background, dude. There it is, Tiger King. Great place to binge along those lines, right? So it's you got your cub pup. Oh, there he is. Yeah. The Tiger King, what a crazy, I mean, we talk about good timing, right, from that standpoint to release that documentary. I mean, it's just nuts. So I'm sure there's lots of other things out there people watch and see. We've also seen lots of these type of deal, right? Lots of memes out there. These are a few of them that some of them my kids sent. Actually, most of them my kids sent, actually. So I pull up from a standpoint, but I'm sure you've seen tons and lots more, right? So it's just crazy, earlier Warren was sharing his background with all the toilet paper, right? I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, people are, for heaven's sakes, hoarding toilet paper. I mean, give me a break. Anyway, so it's just crazy world that we're in at the moment. It's just very interesting. Yeah, there you go. It's very interesting along those lines. That we have there, but it's good that we actually can all take people see humor in this a little bit, right? And that's kind of it's going to keep us a little bit sane. And of course, going back to the Tiger King, if you have not seen the TikTok challenges of Carol Baskin, you guys are missing out. It's okay. Quick poll here: who has not seen a Carol Baskin TikTok challenge video? 1, 2, 3.
I am not.
Man, all right. So you just got to go out. You just look for Carol Baskin TikTok challenge dance, and there's more than enough. This is one that was kind of a compilation of lots of them stuff, but they're all out there. It's just crazy. If you know the premise about Tiger King, Carol Baskin is another player on that perspective, and supposedly, She hasn't been charged. She hasn't been everything along those lines, but everybody believes that she killed her first husband. You know, that's the way it sets up. So it's just nuts. But somebody created a dance and everybody decided to copy it, type of a deal. So it's just nuts. But you know, it's the world, the social world that we're in, right? Because you know, people at home, they're being social distancing, trying to do some things to kind of liven things up a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of where we're at. Gotta love it. All right, now on to more kind of, you know, non-fun stuff, but um, hopefully this year, as we all know, the Adobe Summit was not live. It was not live. It was actually virtual, right? I mean, so from the time that Adobe made that announcement to the time that they went live with their virtual event was a little less than 30 days. And it was crazy nuts. I know a few people there at Adobe and the Marketo teams that they're just, you know, they're running around with their heads cut off, right? Trying to get this done, but they launched. There were over 100 breakout sessions, over 20 Marketo engaged specific ones. There was about 8 or 10 what they call innovation tracks that people had there, and Sarah Kennedy is one of those. As part of that, on the B2B side of the house. There's lots of some keynotes. There's some sneak peeks that they had on the Marketo Engage stuff. There was some product directions or kind of focus or kind of the product roadmap type of area. Most of these sessions, I think, well, pretty much all of them are less than 30 minutes. Most of them are right around that 20 to 25 minute standpoint. So it's not like sitting in a breakout room for 45, 50, an hour and a half type of a deal, or through, you know, multiple keynotes. I mean, you can knock through several of these pretty quickly over the course of an afternoon, or, you know, 1 or 2 during the lunch period type of a deal. So I strongly recommend you go out and look at those. Actually today, you know, Andrew and I are going to talk about a couple of them we saw. I'd like to see if anybody else has heard anything else from that standpoint. Love to hear your feedback as well, if we have time. In addition, maybe many of you have seen, obviously during this whole quarantine and kind of stay home, stay safe, and people working from home remotely, but a lot of organizations have offered up free online training at no cost. Marketo has actually had their education courses, their online services. They have those at no cost to you through the end of June. So another couple of months. And honestly, even if you know Marketo, even if you think you're MCE certified or are looking to get recertified, it's pretty, there's some good stuff out there. It's probably good for review. And if there's things that you're trying to figure out kind of what I'm doing, not a bad thing to kind of go back in and take, do these sessions and walk through the course line and the coursework from that standpoint. Pluralsight, who happens to be here in our backyard, those guys, we're offering all access to all their training materials and services through the end of this month. You know, maybe they'll extend it. Who knows? I know Salesforce was doing some stuff, and there's many more out there. So if now is if you haven't had the chance or kind of looking to add some more things to your repertoire and training, now's the great opportunity along those lines. So there are some benefits that are coming out of this whole situation that we're in, but take advantage of kind of exploring and helping yourselves out from an education and development perspective. All right, some upcoming Salt Lake meetings. Obviously, today's our first virtual. We're going to talk about the virtual summit. And also, we actually have James Ward from Adobe who's going to talk about Bizible. We were going to have a secret guest speaker today, but that individual, we found out, and thank you to James again for jumping in, found out 3 days ago that they were called into an executive meeting, and so that they could not get out of. So we are hoping that they will join us in the next month or two from that perspective. But we're thankful for James from Adobe, who's been able to jump in at the last minute. We'll be hearing from him about Bizible and kind of that data-driven marketing stuff and attribution stuff. So he'll do a quick demo for us about that, which is pretty good stuff. After that, we're not really sure kind of what the rest of the next couple of months are going to flush out, right? We don't really know kind of when we'll be able to meet together again as a whole. We're assuming that the month of May, we'll probably be doing this a virtual one again, just from a standpoint, just because I don't think they're going to release to have more than, 10 people in the room at that point in time, and then we'll kind of play June by ear. So if there are any concepts or any ideas or suggestions or topics or things that you want to talk about, and we're trying to keep this to an hour, definitely let Andrew and I know so we can kind of see some ideas and thoughts along those lines. So just kind of hang with us and play it by ear. We'll see how it goes for the next couple of months, and hopefully after that we'll be able to meet together in person. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to James Ward, who's from Adobe. He'll be presenting about from Bizible. He's actually located up in the Seattle area, if I'm not mistaken. I would guess that you came from the Bizible side before Marketo acquired and before the Adobe acquisition, right? So I'm making that assumption there.
That's correct.
So
pleasure to meet everybody. Happy to be here.
So I'll give the reins to you and go for it from there. So I'll stop sharing and you can share whatever you need to.
Cool. Thanks, Trent. And I'll pull up. Yeah, give me 1 second. The online video sharing platform of Adobe's choice is usually Blue Jeans, so that's what I'm familiar with. But let me blow this up. Let me get I guess just a raise of the hand for anybody on the call who's familiar with Bizible, or even like a past user maybe. Is there anyone?
Yeah, there's a few.
Nice. Good. Yeah, the plan for today is really just to, and again, James Ward, I'm a growth marketing account consultant at Adobe. So really my job is very similar to what I'm doing now, speaking with like the current Marketo customer base around any pain points or initiatives that they may be having that could be addressed specifically with either Adobe software or Marketo software. Obviously, Bizible being a big part of this. Trent, you're exactly right. I came from Bizible originally. So I've been with the company over 3 years ago, or 3 years now. So obviously was there through the Marketo acquisition and then the Adobe acquisition. So I've been in this new role where I'm speaking just with Marketo customer base. It's coming up on a year now. But yeah, really my role is to address any pain points or initiatives, multi-touch attribution being a big part of that. As I'm sure a lot of you know, Bizible is considered the category creator in B2B attribution, like hundreds of 5-star reviews across G2 Crowd, App Exchange, a lot of logos that you'll probably recognize there. And then case studies that usually are on the side of either like unveiling customer journey insights, like getting the full picture of touch points across the channels, sub-channels, the campaigns and programs that marketing teams are invested in. And then kind of the flip side of that is unlocking those data sets and then optimizing budget and spend for the types of marketing channels, campaigns, even down to like to the AdWord or keyword and ad level in terms of optimizing for what's actually driving your like milestones or KPIs like revenue. So I'm happy to share any of this after the call if appropriate. The plan for this was to keep it like fairly high level, just because I didn't know, quite honestly, like how, like what the user group is going to be, like what their familiarity level with Bizible is. So I'll walk through at a high level, like what attribution is, how Bizible's approach to attribution specifically works. And then I'll give you a peek into what it looks like in Salesforce, as well as our own reporting platform called Bizible Discover, which is a BI tool, more or less. It lets you visualize, it has an integration actually with Looker, but it lets you visualize data sets that are coming from both Microsoft Azure and the cloud, as well as your touch points that we're exposing in the CRM. So I'll give you a look into what the software actually looks like, and then any questions that come after the demo, and kind of like a brief walkthrough of when, like from a maturity curve perspective, like when marketing teams are ready to implement a solution like Bizible or multi-touch attribution as a whole. But at a high level, for those that aren't familiar with Bizible or multi-touch, it is a omni-channel and full funnel marketing reporting tool that is achieved through multi-touch attribution. And there's a lot of buzzwords I just said there, but in a nutshell, multi-touch attribution is exposing buying journeys at an account level and the touch points that are taking place through the contacts in your CRM across all the funnel stages that a marketing team may have in place. And obviously every marketing team sets up their funnel a little bit differently, but Visible's in a nutshell exposing that buying journey. And then the power of Bizible is reporting on buying journeys across all of your accounts in your CRM in aggregate, and then seeing what the data tells you more or less. So what did Bizible solve for? I mentioned some of this a second ago, but exposing a buying journey is first and foremost like our bread and butter. We're doing that at the account level, the opportunity level, the contact and lead level in the CRM. So exposing touch points automatically and filtering them in so you know who's interacting when across any investment that the marketing team has in place. And then we're also ensuring that every marketing channel is getting credit. Bizible is kind of like Switzerland in this regard. Even like we're not emphasizing one channel over another. We're just naturally exposing these touch points wherever they may take place. So Marketo is not going to get preferential treatment, for example, over your paid media that may live outside of Marketo. Thirdly, it connects all marketing activity to revenue. This is a KPI that the founders of Bizible more or less want to make sure every marketing team has the capacity to report on. So using revenue as a measurement of success across all investments. And then even going further, tying spend and revenue to your marketing programs, campaigns, keywords, ads. So you can actually do ROI calculations within your budget and spend as well. So these are some of the things, some of the use cases that we typically see from clients that get unlocked with Bizible. I'll go over some more like throughout this, to be quite honest, but those are some of the main, like some of the four like main use cases. Bizible does differentiate quite significantly from what I refer to as legacy attribution or like legacy marketing reporting within Salesforce specifically, in the sense that it's not relying upon existing campaign data to do attribution. So on the digital side of the house, Bizible is actually exposing these touch points, these interactions like via our own mechanisms. I'll touch on them in a little bit later, but we're not relying upon CRM campaigns and the data therein like within your Salesforce instance. There's a number of reasons for that. You can think of Salesforce campaigns as being obviously manual, but as it pertains to attribution, they are usually incomplete from a buying journey perspective, and or the data is inaccurate. And if you're relying on incomplete or inaccurate data to do attribution, at that point, it more or less becomes arbitrary, like what credit you're giving where, because you're gonna, it's like looking through a keyhole to see a full buying journey. And what Bizible's doing is exposing the full buying journey and giving attribution to actual touch points that are occurring throughout the funnel, from anonymous all the way to one closed, while campaigns are really just looking at a sliver of what's going on. So the big takeaway here is that Bizible is actually exposing net new data and exposing it into the CRM. This slide gives a good like snapshot of what legacy attribution has typically encompassed or shown, and that's like giving 100% credit or even 50% credit to first touch or last touch, and last touch really just being like the interaction or touch point where an opportunity was created, but along the way you're missing the interactions that are driving funnel progression and that are actually marketing successes like that are occurring in the funnel. So campaign-based attribution, it's almost like reforming a way in which you can do marketing reporting. So it's trying to move away from this campaign-based attribution mindset. So it's a bit of reframing taking place when you're first introducing the concept of multi-touch attribution. There's a lot going on in this slide. I'll just touch on three of the boxes. There's really three main components. So you can think of it as like pieces of the pie in terms of how Bizible actually is achieving touchpoint exposure. It starts with the JavaScript, which you see on the far left. It's similar in some capacity to the Marketo Munchkin code, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but the Bizible JS is different in the sense that it's a 365-day rolling JavaScript. So it's far more robust. I believe Marketo is a 90-day expiring cookie. Even Adobe Analytics, which is primarily a B2C attribution, solution is 90 days as well. This is 365-day rolling, so as long as somebody comes back to the website once a year, that cookie will renew. And what that JS is doing is storing that anonymous web session data until someone can actually raise their hand and self-identify on the site. And obviously there's a number of ways in which you can do that, whether it's to be like a webinar or a chat, you download a form. But once that self-identification takes place, Bizible then looks back at all the previous web sessions, assuming there were any, and ties together that anonymous data with the interaction or touch point or web session where a lead was created, where somebody did self-identify, and then gives credit to that initial engagement that drove that anonymous web session. Across most of Bizible's models, it's a powerful like brand recognition moment, and it gets weighted fairly heavily because it's the first time at the account level or a contact that they've like discovered your brand. So it gets weighted accordingly. But the JS is fundamentally key to how we're exposing like who are behind these web sessions, who are behind these interactions and visits. So the JS is 1/3 of the puzzle. The second third, and this is a big distinguisher between Bizible and other players in the space, we have live APIs into the ad network logos you see there. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Google AdWords, Bing, DoubleClick. If you're confident in your reporting right now, you may be able to say, you know what, for our paid media, in Q4 of 2019, Facebook drove X amount of MQLs. With Bizible, you're able to look into performance as it pertains specifically to like cost even within these ad networks. So you can look into Facebook and say in Q4, like what specific ads that we're bidding on actually drove MQLs. So let's stack rank our keywords or ads based off of some of these universal KPIs. Bizible lets you measure success by, revenue being a big one, ROI being a big one. We're actually pulling cost via these APIs directly from the ad network itself. So you can look in and see and do like ROI calculations very much in real time. And it just gives you really good insight into how your paid media is performing. And then obviously you can optimize within these ad networks themselves. And so the use cases from Bizible really get unlocked even more when you have a marketing team investing heavily in paid media, because the insights you can extract from these API connections are very powerful. It's kind of the second third of the puzzle. Lastly, the thing that ties this all together is integration directly into Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce obviously being the most popular of that. But Bizible is placing a custom object that lives at the contact, the lead, the opportunity and account level. And the main role of that custom object is to stitch together every touch point of interaction that individual or that account is having, and then in aggregate show exactly what's occurring throughout your funnel, from anonymous throughout all your funnel stages. So it's aggregating those touch points. You will see sales activity on the far right. The custom object can also read off the activity record. So if there's a BDR, ADR, SDR team in place who's actually logging dispositions, you can set whatever criteria the sales activity team is logging that would be worthy of attribution. I say worthy in quotation marks, but every team sets it up a little bit differently. So it could be an actual like phone connect where somebody agrees to go to a demo, or whatever the nomenclature those dispositions are. You can set that criteria, and then the Bizible custom object will pull in the activity record that individual disposition as a touch point, so it shows during that account's buying journey, and then everything ultimately gets funneled in the CRM. And I'll run through this slide really quickly because Salesforce will show this a little bit better. But in the end, you get a buying journey where we're exposing who are actually behind the touch points and what part of the funnel that touch point occurred at. And obviously every team sets it up a little bit differently. This is just an example of the funnel. And at a high level, not only what drove initial engagement, like the channel, but what they did at the website as well. So it's more than just say Marketo that's getting credit, or more than just LinkedIn. It's also the white paper that they downloaded, or the blog post they visited, the webinar they registered for. The data dimensions actually get very, very, very deep relative to traditional Salesforce campaigns, but there's a lot you can report on within each touch point. And obviously the power of Bizible is taking every touch point, for every buying journey across all opportunities and accounts, and then reporting on these things in aggregate. And then this is just an example of an attribution model that you see below. And then where you report on these things, Bizible is relatively agnostic to. So the data does ultimately get exposed in the CRM, but if you have a BI tool that plugs into Salesforce, you can report on the data there. You can obviously do Salesforce reporting, and then I mentioned this earlier, but there's Bizible Discover, which is our own reporting tool as well. So the big takeaway is that Bizible's exposing these buying journeys, where you extract value, where you report out of, we're agnostic to. And I'll take a quick look now and bring up what it looks like in Salesforce. Let me see how I'm doing on time here. All right, so this is an account view in Salesforce, obviously Salesforce Lightning. There's some other ancillary features that are that live at the account level. Like there is lead to account mapping that Bizible does. We also have an account engagement score, which is based off of touch points. It's called the predictive engagement score. It's an essentially account level scoring system. You can almost think of it as lead scoring on steroids, but at the account level. So just how engaged is an account across all of your marketing channels.
Hey, James, really quickly, we're only seeing your deck. We're not seeing the demo stuff.
No, you're not. Interesting.
Yeah. Just FYI.
Thank you for saying that. Are you seeing my, you're seeing my Google Chrome now?
So what I'd recommend you do is if you turn off your screen
Resume
share,
share.
turn it back on,
Gotcha.
and pick your screen.
It's frozen for me.
Yeah, let me redo it then.
There you go.
That solve it?
Yeah, just tweak your flux capacitor. You're all good.
Yeah, it's funny with all of these. They all have their different quirks. Blue Jeans is far worse by all accounts. But this is relatively easy. Okay. So yeah, this is obviously Salesforce. This is Lightning. This is Bizible's demo environment. This is called Pipeline Marketer, so just a name for an account. And like I said, there's some ancillary features like lead to account mapping. We have a predictive engagement score, which is an account level scoring system. But the main takeaway that I'll touch on here is this Bizible attribution touchpoint section, which if you go back to the slide with the floating heads, is really the real life incarnation of what that slide was meant to represent, in the sense that what we're exposing here is every touch point for, in this case, we have 6+ contacts, I believe there's 7, across 7 contacts and multiple opportunities. It's neat, so both of these are one closed. But what we're exposing here is every touch point on the account level across 2 opportunities, 7 contacts, presented in chronological order. So you can see the touch point dates on the far right. And then you're getting the contacts, so who are responsible for these interactions, what part of the funnel or life cycle stage did it occur in. And again, Bizible has the capacity to actually match your marketing team's funnel nomenclature and the number of stages that would be shown at the touch point position, which is obviously key for things like conversion reporting. Touch point sources at a high level, what drove that interaction. So you see Marketo, you see sales activity with BDR outreach, and Facebook retargeting, and you have organic, Google. The channel, sub-channel hierarchy is something that you would do during Bizible implementation. And then to the far right is the revenue on those 2 opportunities being credited via different models. And if you actually go into an individual touch point, you then can see the subfields that Bizible's collecting. So every subfield under attribution touchpoint dimension is now reportable and is getting credit in some way, shape, or form. You do see the revenue amounts down below, but this is just one KPI that Bizible lets you touch on. Things like pipeline revenue, contact creation, lead creation, opportunity creation. Those are all KPIs you'll be able to report on with Bizible as well, on which you can measure success. But every subfield that you see under attribution touchpoint dimension is being automatically exposed. In this case, with our integration with Google AdWords. So down from channel path, source, medium, the ad campaign name, ad content, even landing page, refer page. These are all things that are now getting attribution in some way, shape, or form. It just depends on what KPI you're measuring success with. And then you can do, obviously, out-of-the-box Salesforce reporting. So some reports saying, and again, this is pretty much the tip of the iceberg in terms of what reports you can extract with Bizible, but looking at things like what channels during a given time frame are driving MQLs, what channels are driving opportunities, what channels are driving closed-won revenue, and then you can look at the conversion rates between some of your life cycle or funnel stages, like MQLs to ops, ops to closed-won revenue, like what channels driving pipeline revenue, what keywords are driving revenue. So stack ranking of your keywords by revenue, your social ads by revenue, your content, your events, refer pages, blogs. This is a defaulting to stack ranking everything based on closed-won revenue, but I'll show you in Bizible Discover in a second that you could really do the same thing with other KPIs as well. Let me switch to Bizible Discover, if I can move this dash. There we go. So this is Bizible Discover. For teams that aren't invested in a BI tool, this is a great place to, I guess, extract more value with Bizible. This is iteration 5.0 of Bizible Discover. It was initially built to give marketers the ability to do cost reporting, which has traditionally been near impossible to do in the CRM. So we're pulling cost and doing ROI calculations directly in Bizible Discover. And for teams that aren't necessarily like living in Salesforce, it just gives them another mechanism which they can do reporting with little to no training. Each of these dashboards that you see on the left are really their own little world in terms of what they show. Fairly self-explanatory in a lot of instances. This is the overview dashboard. The filters are a great place to just narrow down or expand on the data you're looking at. So whether you're changing metric from revenue to opportunities, if you want to look at specific channels, specific sub-channels, specific campaigns, if you're doing segmentation in the CRM, you're able to segment in these filter sets as well. So this takes a look at like 2017 marketing performance, for example, like all closed-won revenue within that year, the spend, ROI calculations, the deals, cost per deal, the channels that are driving closed-won revenue month over month. You can save these filter sets as well. So if you want to look at like a specific campaign and measure its performance based on opportunities, you can save that filter and then run it within Bizible Discover. So you get a good look of, okay, how responsible or like how successful was this CMO campaign at creating opportunities? And within that campaign, what sub-channels did those opportunities come from? You can really narrow or broaden what you're filtering for within each of these dashboards. And for teams that haven't invested in a BI tool, it gives them like an easy way in which they can dip their feet into that world, if that makes sense. I'll end there and kind of go back to the deck I had pulled up. So who's ready for Bizible? The one prerequisite, in all sincerity, is really like the integration is currently only with Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. So if you're on a different CRM system, not compatible. But key indicators for good fits would be like an omni-channel budget distribution. So marketing teams that aren't invested in like a singular channel, because there's less of a need, obviously, to do omni-channel or full funnel marketing reporting. Like if you just invested in Marketo, for example, like Marketo has great tools, most likely to give you the insights you need, whether that's ARB or MSI. So if you're having current challenges doing any marketing reporting, Bizible fits a lot of use cases that can be unlocked. If you're having trouble looking into buying journeys, like what's actually occurring throughout your marketing channels, throughout the funnel, Bizible will unlock that. If you want to get ROI as a metric in which you can measure success, obviously Bizible unlocks that. And then just organizations as a whole that are data driven. I mean, this is their bread and butter then. And the more marketing teams are spending in general, the more of a need there is to measure how successful their marketing efforts are. And the more of a need there is to do it effectively, and then obviously optimize their spend. And that's where Bizible comes in. I don't know if we want to do Q&A now, or I think we had Q&A for the end of the call as well, Trent. So happy to pause here and come back to Bizible questions if there are any.
Yeah, let's just kind of see if there's anybody has any questions for you right now about Bizible and attribution modeling, things of that nature. I mean, if there's anything that is great, or we can. Anybody has some burning questions right at the moment? Okay. Well, hang tough with us, and if you have some more questions, we'll have a little bit of time with QA at the end. So think about kind of what you saw, and if you have any questions, James will hang with us to the end of the mug today. So perfect. Thank you, sir.
Of course.
All right, so let me jump back over to where we're at. All right, so that was James. So now we're going to kind of quickly jump into Andrew's going to give us a recap of one of the sessions that he watched with the Adobe Virtual Summit. And then time available, I'll do a quick little data dump on another one I saw, and then we'll open up to Q&A and input from anybody else. So we want to hear from you guys rather than making this more of a push. But all right, Andrew, it's all yours, my friend. I'll just I'll hit the space bar whenever.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll be real quick. There's just a couple of things that I wanted to just point out. There's the presentation I watched was called Omnichannel Nurturing, and it was strategies for omnichannel nurturing. It was a really good presentation. It's only about 22 minutes long. It was given by Megan Rao. If you guys know her, she used to be on the, or she still is actually on the Marketo customer marketing team, and she does a really good job. So let me just go ahead and we'll move forward. They actually walked us through a scenario about how they use Marketo specifically for post-sale communication. We all know that Marketo is really good at pre-sale stuff and kind of nurturing the lead into close, but it can also be really good for post-sale communication and nurturing those customers as they continue to use the tool. But their whole goal was to figure out how to increase adoption and how to make adoption a lot more relevant. So go ahead and move on here real quick. So, and we can tell you about the problem. So basically the big deal was that there was a lack of post-sale communications, and there was some slow and poor adoption that they were running into. Most of the content that they had was all sales focused. I think that's very similar for all of us, right? A lot of our content that we have specifically for nurturing leads, it's all sales content because our goal is to drive leads and close deals. And what that also meant was that there's no comprehensive strategy and very little cross-functional coordination between departments, right? So it's all just sales, sales, sales. Just get the deal, get the deal, get the deal. Let's go ahead and move on. So what they did is they kind of attacked the problem from three areas. They looked at the content, they looked at their operational framework, and they looked at their delivery strategy. How are they going to actually pull all those things together in order to make really good post-sale communications and increase adoption and retention? Keep going. So what they did with the content is they made it a lot more personalized, a lot more relevant. We have all heard that before, that content needs to be personal, needs to be relevant. There's a couple of things that I thought were really interesting. The first is that they actually created custom scoring modules in Marketo. They gave everybody an adoption score and a feature score. And so specifically, they would say the adoption score is like your overall kind of person score within Marketo. But then the feature score was what types of features they were actually consuming content on and learning about. And they would give them a feature score. So if it was email marketing, if it was analytics, if it was the search engine optimization module, or whatever it happened to be, or the nurture streams, they would give them feature scores. And then depending on what their score was, they would put them into specific nurture streams and increase that adoption. One of the things they said about content is that especially after you've purchased the program or purchased the product, people like to consume content from their peers and see use cases. They almost never like to hear from the organization as a whole. They're like, yeah, you've told me everything you need to know. I want to know how people are actually using it. So they actually took a lot of their content and repackaged it so that it was more focused on that. And then they learned very early on that they wanted to content that combined marketing strategy with Marketo strategy, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to look at things. They also had something really cool that was called a fast track button and a feedback button. So at the bottom of every email or content that they would actually put together, there was a little button that says, hey, I want to learn more. And it was essentially the fast track button so that they didn't have to wait for the next email or message or whatever to come through. They just press the button and they would get the next message or get taken to the next site. So I thought that was really cool. We can move on real quick. Oh, no worries. And then their operational framework kind of set up like this. They had 4 categories of nurture programs. So most of the nurture programs were 10 long and sometimes 25 deep. So you can imagine how complicated this can get. And they've got some really good technical examples in the presentation that I'd encourage you to go and watch because they're about 5 minutes long, but they're really good. Essentially the categories of nurture programs, they had an onboarding nurture program, an early adoption, an advanced adoption, which I thought was interesting. And then the last one they had was an add-on. Most everybody buys Marketo for the nurturing part of it, right? And making sure that we kind of figure out exactly how to nurture those leads that come through. But I thought it was interesting that they put on all those add-ons, and so as people kind of moved through that advanced adoption and really got to know the program, there was always something that they could be learning with the add-ons. And so there's actually several different add-on nurture programs that they had. There were some base add-ons and some more advanced add-ons as well. They also had this idea of a nurture traffic cop, which essentially was a program that they had written, custom program that they had written to evaluate the criteria of what nurture program they were in and what content they were consuming, and then be able to push that particular person to whatever nurture program they wanted to, depending on where they happen to be in the onboarding or early adoption or any of those other different programs. So I could spend probably 20 minutes talking about the nurture traffic cop, but I won't. But that's something to go and take a look at real quick. And then lastly, on the delivery strategy, just a couple of quick things here. You want to really repackage your existing content so that you can scale. I know, we talk a lot about the fact that there's a lot of content that's out there that's very sales heavy. Well, if you take some of the sales language out, a lot of the principles still apply. And so you want to just repackage it a little bit in order to kind of build that content to scale. And then, add new channels on at a time. Marketo said that as they were kind of building out some of these post-channel communications, they want to have email, and they want to have SMS, and they want to have social, and they want to have whatever else it is that they've got, push notifications through the app. I said, look, in a lot of cases for B2B in particular, it's really just email and website at this point. So don't get seduced by a lot of those flashy channels just yet. Stuff will come later, but it's at least for a post communications world, it may not necessarily be as important. I would ask for questions, but I want to give Trent some time. So Trent, I will turn it back over to you.
Oh, geez, thanks. I was hoping people ask questions. So yeah, that's okay. We'll walk through this one really quickly as well, right? So kind of a session I looked at, I've watched several of them, including one of our attendees today, Michael's as well. So great stuff out there, guys. So if you haven't go out there and read them all or come watch and review them. But the one I looked at was a basic, don't be a basic bat, test, nurture, program success. The reason why is because I've had a lot of customers and other people keep asking, okay, how do I manage my nurture programs along those lines? And so I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. This was done by Jessica Cow and Jen DeMera, both from Digital Pie there from that standpoint. So those are the ones that presented. It was about 26 minutes, I think, in length, total from start to end. But so that's kind of where we're at. Kind of the big part of it, right, is kind of the question like, is my nurture program working? Obviously, as we look at kind of nurture programs across the board, and Andrew kind of teed it up really well from that perspective, is that you got these nurture programs out there, but then how do you kind of look at the success of those things? And how do you kind of understand if it's working, if it has any value along those lines. They talked about making sure that you define your goals and objectives properly, using the SMART acronym, right? From that standpoint. Also to realize that your nurture programs need to be treated differently than your batch programs. It's kind of your one and done, so to speak, or kind of your program elements along those lines. Just realize that nurture is more long-term, batches are one-time off from that perspective. They also talked about too that a lot of folks try to do some A/B testing in a nurture program. You can do that, but the recommendation is not the best place to do that. So really your batch emails, if you want to do A/B testing, are really in regards to just like traditional stuff, right? Either an email program or just a regular batch email program, but things that you might test around like your CTA, subject lines, copy, colors, buttons, et cetera, et cetera. All the stuff that we've done with A/B testing and continue to do that on a daily basis. But they said that that's really not, nurture program, that's better in a batch email, but not a nurture program. But you can do A/B testing nurture programs, and they walk through a process of how to do that, and I won't go into those details, but there's ways to do that if you really want to kind of understand how nurture programs are done in line along those lines, but they recommend that you do those outside of a nurture program more than anything else. The other part too that was interesting is that if you want to start to measure kind of how your nurture programs are working, that you need to create a nurture score field. So basically, it's a way to actually capture mathematically kind of how people are progressing and engaging through your nurture program, right? So we know that with Marketo's nurture programs, you have the engagement scores, you see how people are flowing through the various streams of programs and emails, communications, but you're really not quite understanding, and you get some behavior and kind of demographic scores by individuals, but then the point is that you're trying to translate it into your nurture program, and you really can't, right? Because you might have multiple call to actions in different areas across the board, right? So you're not really sure where that's at. So they did recommend that obviously make sure that as part of that kind of those goals and objectives, your nurturing scoring does not correlate to MQLs. So that was a big thing they kept emphasizing a couple of times. So it's a way for you to measure how people are moving through the program, but not necessarily a direct correlation into MQLs. There might be, but it's not necessarily as part of the process. They walk through the steps of how to create a new nurture score field. So really need to create a new field within your Marketo database. You create a SMART campaign to trigger off a program status change, and obviously channels and tags are really important as you start looking at your nurture programs for perspective, to make sure that then you increase that score by just a 1, just a value of 1, not 10, not 21, not 15. I mean, it's just a value of 1 because it shows them as they're engaging through each one of those emails. And so you start seeing how people are engaging by email perspective across your nurture path. So you take that whole score and then you look at reporting. And then you look at kind of reporting, once again, going back to the SMART campaigns and understand the difference between batch email programs and nurture email programs. The point here is that understand that your batches are one and done. You're looking at your email reports, your typical stuff, your opens, clicks, those type of things. That's kind of really what you get reports on. Whereas your nurture emails, you're looking at across multiple emails, right? Kind of long-term processes, and so how do I look at it from that standpoint? And so if you look at it, I know it's kind of a busy screen here, but if you look at from the standpoints like everybody understands when you start looking at nurture programs, right? So you got they did an analogy with these color buses, blue, purple, and green bus lines. Well, the blue bus line goes off on first. They get email 1, and then they get email 2 and email 3, and they're cast and processed. But then by the time you get to your green train basically has only received 1 email, while the blue trains received 3, right? So now you're saying, okay, now how do I manage kind of the success of all these pieces of the puzzle? And so based on the nurture score model field that's in place, you create some SMART campaigns and lists to create lists based on your categories, every people there, kind of where they've engaged into the program. You look at your time frames, so you can look at from a specific time frame perspective. And then they said, believe it or not, you still have to take this out into Excel. And so you got to take it out into the Excel, and you start doing some manipulation on that data, looking at how you can look at kind of change data percentages along those lines, manipulate it, create some nice charts. And basically they said that's how you start to look at your nurture score models rather than looking at individual model from a reporting perspective. So there's a lot more into that information. I know at the top of the hour here, but that's just kind of where they're at from a reporting perspective. So just take some time, takes like I said, 25 minutes to read through it and go through it, and you'll be good to go. So with that, I know that we're at the top of the hour, but if anybody wants to hang on, if anybody else has any other perspectives or insights from other sessions that you viewed on or walked through or thought about or saw that you want to kind of share with the group, I mean, we can hang out for a few more minutes for everybody who wants to hang on. Or any questions you have for anybody else. So.
Muted. There you go. I wouldn't mind jumping in for a sec if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so I really had a question actually. I love that you talked about Megan in a session on user adoption, and kind of think the world of her, and like that she's actually presenting at this, and then kind of wondered applying that to the Bizible presentation. What's the onboarding look like for Bizible when you go into to set up an account on that? You know, how do you typically guide a user once they get the software to kind of start deploying that? You know, is there an exploratory process, and then you kind of dive into your business requirements, and you know, how's that? What's the best practice kind of for a lot of those implementations that you've seen?
Yeah, great question. Implementation can really vary in length. On average, it takes about 7 to 8 weeks. The first thing we want to do is quite frankly just get data flowing in to make sure we're exposing all customer journeys immediately. So we'd like to put the JavaScript on the website, whether that's hard coded or via Google Tag Manager, to do the Salesforce install, to connect with your ad networks. Like that can all happen on the second call. The first call is mostly like a mapping and planning call, but then you kind of hit the nail on the head. A lot of the heavy lifting is doing channel configuration, hierarchy, like know your investments in and out, sub-channel, like how things are, like what that hierarchy looks like, where are your campaigns? Do you want to use historical campaign data? When you do attribution, a lot of people don't like to start on a blank slate, because with Bizible, you can either look back a year at your campaigns or just start anew in essence, but then you lose a lot of data. So what's your confidence level in the data within your campaigns if we're doing look back? We do cost discovery is a big part of this too, because when we do ROI calculations, we want to leave no rock unturned, like all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. Like we're pulling in cost in some instances, like automatically, but in others, it does necessitate like a traditional upload into Bizible, especially for offline. So a lot of this is very much discovering into the lay of the land. That's a big component of it. So there's some education that'll happen after that as well. Like best practices get released. It really depends on like the size of the marketing team too. So the bigger the marketing team, the longer the implementation, the more people have to be taught. Like the Salesforce admin, quite frankly, doesn't have a lot of time spent during implementation, but the practitioners and the power users are the ones who will be like spending most of the time with that professional services consultant.
Okay. Is there usually a professional services allotment of hour? Like I know if you get, let's say for example in Marketo, you get workspaces and partitions, you usually have like an allotment of professional services hours. Is that included with Bizible then?
No is the short answer. Like the implementation will be ongoing until it's completed. So they're not going to be too stringent on the amount of hours needed. There will be less. Bizible's pricing is based off of feature functionality. So you'll pay more for tier 1 than you would for tier 3. You'll also spend more time onboarding for tier 3, but they're not going to, if you're not fully implemented, they're not going to cut you off.
Yeah.
And then I guess coming back to your other question, right? So the stakeholders, you know, with all the different channels that you have the ability to be able to monitor and then get input onto, you know, just for somebody who's championing this with inside of an organization, it's your CRM stakeholder that you know, your CRM champion you need to have on board with you. You know, historically, the instances that you've seen really work the best. You know, what's the base people that you want to have on board to be able to pull the trigger on something like this successfully in terms of the roles?
Yeah.
Of the people?
Another great question. Yeah. Two two personas, like the operations team, because this will directly impact their ability to do reporting. Like for orgs who have the luxury of having like a BI tool or even a marketing data analyst, like those are stakeholders. This will directly impact their ability to get insights. And then on the flip side of that is really like demand gen digital. This will directly impact the insights operations get from Bizible, and we'll be able to give demand gen, like directly impact their role, like how they allocate their spend, like what's working, what's not working. So we usually get budget from the digital side of the house, quite frankly, just because operations usually doesn't have like a big allotment of money to spend, and demand gen typically does. And they're benefactors of Bizible more so than operations. Operations is just part of their job. The real use cases that impact the orgs are like mostly on the demand gen digital side of the house.
Mm-hmm. So, I think one thing that's worth kind of cross noting here is that there is a Bizible virtual Marketo user group, or I guess a virtual Bizible user group that is it Kimberly Gallant's runs, and I can't remember who their co-host is running. So there's some pretty interesting user education resources that are there. For people that are kind of looking to kind of dive a little bit deeper in, like I like your presentation. I'm glad you're recording this, Trent, because I'm going to probably go back into that. But where else would you point them? You point them to the user group, and then what are other resources that you should be looking at if you're a marketing leader looking to do something like this?
Well, quite frankly, like you're a Marketo customer success manager, and what they'll do most likely is point them to either myself or one of my counterparts, and kind of dive into like what's going on, how you're currently reporting, like what insights in a perfect world would you have that you're not getting now, like just a whole slew of questions, like kind of during the discovery process. Bizible is part of the tech stack that we can address issues with. We do have some other like partner or reseller software that could slot in as well. And then we would either like be more than happy to show you a demo in very like a consultatory manner. Like this is meant to help customers, not like pitch them a software they have to buy. And we're working directly with the CSMs too. So the name of the game is just like plugging pain points, plugging gaps in their reporting. But we'd be happy to demo or share any, like there's lots of collateral online that either we could give directly to customers or could point them to ourselves, whether that's white papers or one pages. There's some videos. But you're right, like the Bizible user group too is a powerful resource if they can join.
Mm. So I think the one Bizible session that I saw at the last Adobe Summit, there was going over the product roadmap, and they were talking about anonymous data before a lead becomes anonymous, basically, and being able to track that. And I'm not sure if I think it was. I'm trying to remember who was presenting on that, but could you talk a little bit about the capabilities that the tool has? You're getting a JavaScript tag on somebody before they're known, but what's the richness of that data kind of look like at a high level?
Yeah. So fundamentally, we can expose. Bizible has the ability to expose every anonymous web session, every visit by known and unknown users. So there's a ton of raw data that we're getting that's sitting in Microsoft Azure server. We're only pushing touch points of what I refer to as significance to the CRM. We do have something called we do have data warehouse functionality in essence to give to teams, and I'll say this with a grain of salt because most teams aren't in a place where they need that amount of data, let alone have a BI tool and a data analyst who can actually manipulate this data well enough to extract like meaningful value out of it. But we only push touch points of significance to the CRM. So that first anonymous touch point at the account level, since we've been collecting data. So the first time anyone on the account level, any contact or lead has interacted or first came to the website, the first one out of all of them, because there's obviously lots of anonymous web sessions taking place. We're only taking the true first anonymous and giving it and sliding it in for attribution purposes. But there's lots of other anonymous web sessions and touch points that we're gathering and storing in this Azure server that we hypothetically have the ability to give customers access to. They just have to, it's absolutely a little bit more costly, but we are truly collecting every web session by known and unknown. So if the C-suite is truly interested in what channels are actually driving traffic, like not just known traffic, but anonymous traffic, and sophisticated marketing teams sometimes get there if they have the resources. Like we have the ability to give you all that raw session data.
That's really great.
That's great. So I know that we're a little bit over time and so forth, and a lot of people jump, but go ahead and wrap up from the standpoint. But so yeah, thanks, and great questions, Michael. And like I said, hopefully I hit the record button properly and it recorded properly and stuff along those lines. James, thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for everybody else who participated. And as I mentioned before, that for next month and whatnot, it's TBD. We're going to stay tuned with us, and probably be another virtual one. We'll figure this all out. But in the meantime, just like a couple of ones, like our friend across the pond, Warren, there's lots of virtual ones out there. Go on the mugs.marketo.com site and take a look at that one, because pretty much all the mugs today are virtual at the moment. So feel free to join in and participate with those as needed. And then once we get back in line, there's still the virtual ones like Michael runs and so forth. So great opportunities in the visible ones. So it's always good to kind of get a broader knowledge and depth of what everything's going forward. So thanks everybody, and have a great afternoon. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Trent.
Yes.
Thank you, Trent.
Everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.